Veronica Goss. I am a member of the Tulsa, Oklahoma chapter of the Links Incorporated, where I serve as chair of the Arts Facet. One of the Facet's goal is to increase and expand art activity throughout Black communities, particularly among minority youth. The Facet is particularly interested in spreading messages throughout our communities through visual art. Our guests to address our interests in the arts are Representative Regina Goodwin and artist Alexander Tahman. Regina is a native Tulsan who currently serves as the Assistant Minority Floor Leader and the Chair of the Oklahoma Legislative Black Caucus. She is also an accomplished artist. Alexander is a Fort Worth native who chose Tulsa as home after attending Oral Roberts University. He is a member of the Tulsa-based Black Moon Collective, and his work has been included in Inclusion in Art at the Hall. His most recent work is the Black Wall Street mural located on Peoria Avenue in North Tulsa.
Hello, Representative Goodwin. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing excellent. Thank you so much for joining us on today. We know your busy schedule. We know you're a busy lady, but we appreciate you so much.
Well, let me say this. I know you know all about busy, so we just have to work it out. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. So we have with us today Representative Regina Goodwin. She serves as the Assistant Minority Floor Leader and Chairman of the Oklahoma Legislative Black Caucus. And we're so excited that she's here because we know they're in session now, so she's probably in and out. So she stopped in just to have a chat with us, the Links Incorporated, pertaining to our social justice series that we're doing right now, that we're launching. And we have a couple of questions for Representative Goodwin today that she's going to help us to answer when it pertains to the arts, when it comes to the arts. And we know that Representative Goodwin is an accomplished artist herself. So, Ms. Goodwin, have you been able to do any of your artwork lately? We know you're busy, but what's the last thing you created here lately?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for calling me an accomplished artist. Let me say thank you for that. I absolutely, art really is my first love. And, it is very difficult, really is difficult to draw and paint in the middle of all of this. We barely have time to eat lunch, literally. We have maybe 10 minutes to eat lunch. So I have not been able to do that kind of work, but I will say, absolutely, I love stopping in to schools and doing art projects with children. And certainly we do that. And I've been privileged to partner in that way. And so to that degree, I am engaged. And we were able to do a mural on one of the buildings. And basically it says, "Love and Let Live." Awesome. And it had to do with some of the drive-by shootings that have been going on in the neighborhood. And so when we can incorporate it into our work, we do. And so that's the answer to that.
Awesome. So I would love to see some of that and some of your accomplished artwork. So we know we're coming up on the 100th year anniversary of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre celebration. And so there are a lot of things going on in the city when it pertains to that. So we decided as the Links Incorporated here in Tulsa is to do a social justice series, try to highlight that memorial. And one of the things that we're focusing on when it comes to the facets in our organization on the arts is talking about increasing art activity in the Black community. And how can we increase art activity in the Black community, and particularly when it comes to minority youth, because we really want to get them involved and to let them know that we do not want the art activity to die out in our Black communities. So with that being said, I have for my first question, how does or can the arts directly send messages to the community in reference to social justice and action?
So let me say this. Honest to God, just on, I think it was on yesterday, I was looking at how, for those that are people of faith, how Jesus Christ himself is represented in art and how that affects the psyche of a child. And when we look at history, we know that Jesus was a Black man. And when we talk about his physical characteristics in the Bible, we're talking about bronze skin and woolly hair, right? And I think when kids are growing up thinking that Jesus was blonde haired and blue eyed,
Yes.
that affects your psyche. You really cannot envision a Jesus any other way. So just the very fact that artists were commissioned to paint Jesus, and you look at the very, very early paintings of God or the Madonna, they were Black folks.
Yes.
And it didn't change until later, centuries later. So it absolutely impacts who we think we are, how we see each other. And I can say from the very core of your faith, I think it's very empowering if a little Black child knows that Jesus is a Black man. That's very empowering.
I love that answer. That is so true. And you're right. That's exactly where it starts, in the mind, right? So in the perception. That is so true. Thank you for that. So what ways is this represented in Tulsa, primarily the Black community?
Well, let me tell a very brief story, and I'll be very quick on this. How does it impact Black Tulsa? I tell you, the more we know and we share, the better off we are. And I was privileged one time to be with Muhammad Ali, the Muhammad Ali.
Awesome.
And we went out to go visit Oral Roberts. And Oral Roberts literally had a picture of a white Jesus behind his head. And Muhammad Ali said in that instance, Jesus wasn't a white man. And it was an education for me because I had heard that and I knew it, but I had never seen it discussed in an open way with the very folks that are praying to the same God and in different ways, right? And so not only was it a different perspective, but it was a different visual in terms of who Muhammad Ali saw God as and who Oral Roberts saw God as. And that was encouraging. So one is communication, the other is education. And I think that's how we work through that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So moving into the centennial of the Tulsa Race Massacre, it appears that the city, government, and local officials are pumping the history for regentrification purposes that will benefit yet again the white community. So how can art send messages from Black voices to ensure the legacy of Greenwoods and Black Wall Street still belongs to the Black community?
Okay, so one, again, being honest with ourselves, and surely whenever there is a project to be done, you want to enlist capable Black folks. You want to hire those artists that can best tell our story, those that have that shared and lived experience. That's one place to start, right? Get with folks that know the story, and whether they're artists in terms of creative writers, right? Because they're also artists. We want our story to be told accurately. And we don't want our history rewritten. When they crack me up, when they talk about they want to revisit the history. No, I just need you to tell the history, right? We're not trying to revisit the massacre, but we do want to be able to tell the truth. So I think one, having those honest conversations with the business folks that are either perpetuating the propaganda. Let's have the honest conversations. And if they're not willing to listen, then we have to encourage each other and make sure that we're educated and we're aware and that we're not just going to be told anything and accept it. So those are places. Again, goes back to telling the truth. You got to have truth tellers and truth listeners.
Yes, absolutely. Excellent. I agree. Why was the Black Wall Street painted street sign not considered a mural, a form of street art, such as the mural in Washington, D.C.?
So I was a big pusher in saying that from day one, other cities had considered the Black Lives Matter as art, right? And there wasn't a big problem with it. And so it came down to politics, and it depends on who the politician is and who's making the decision. And unfortunately, you had folks making decisions that did not agree that it was a mural. And it really came down to the fact that some folks were offended that we had the audacity to say Black Lives Matter. And we weren't saying Black Lives Matter more, we were saying Black Lives Matter just as much. And that is, it should have been considered art, and it should still be on that street. And so it came down to politics and somebody's perspective, bottom line, political. And it was wrong. It was a wrong decision as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We spoke on that in a press conference specifically
Yes.
to the laws that could have been utilized to keep that mural there on the street.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So how can Black voices be taken seriously in street art, murals and billboards and things of that nature? How can we take those things seriously?
Well, I think depending on who the audience is, I think we find it meaningful when we see ourselves represented in artwork, right? When we see a Black Madonna, or when we see a picture of a Black mother and child, or when we just see a Black family around the dining room table, right?
Right.
We see artwork where we see ourselves. So it's meaningful for us. And quite frankly, for a lot of white folks, it's meaningful for them because there are a lot of things that we share, right?
Right.
Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants peace. Everybody wants a happy family. And people can see that in a painting because that emotion and those ideas that we care about most, it connects because it's human, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I believe our artwork is already meaningful. And for those that don't think it is, that's something for them to work out.
Great. That's absolutely true. It's in the eye of the beholder.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And again, conversation. It's about not being afraid to have those honest conversations. When you see somebody trying to belittle artwork by, say, a particular Black artist or scene that depicts Black life, and if someone tries to belittle that, we need to speak up and talk about this is our history. This is our legacy, right? We like to be in Big Mama's kitchen. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I love that we need to take ownership of that situation at the moment and speak up.
Amen. That's right.
I love that. Great. Yeah. Absolutely. So we have a final question for you, Representative Goodwin. In what ways can art and the Black community keep the legacy of Black Wall Street alive after the festivities are all over and the city has benefited from the profits of the celebration? What's next? What then?
All right. And to your point, after some folks sweep in town and tell this story their way and they profit off of our pain, when that's all said and done, we're going to keep doing what we've done, right? We have continued to, I hope, present ourselves in the best light. We're human beings. We know we have flaws, but we also know we come from mighty good stock. And I am tremendously privileged to be born in a Black family with a great-grandfather and a great-grandmother who, during the race massacre, right, when their article of music, right, when we talk about art, their piano was destroyed in the race massacre, their hard-earned property and businesses, they had the audacity to go down and file a claim in courts. And they were rejected outright. They never saw a day of justice. But we owe it to their legacy to continue to speak truth to power. And guess what? Artwork is very impactful. You have literally seen nations rise up because somebody either sang a song a certain way, somebody painted a particular picture, somebody did a Black Power sign, and somebody was offended by that. Artwork is very powerful. And
even through books, right? Even through artists. Even we have these famous artists who wrote books during those times too, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So whether you're a writer, whether you're a musician, whether you have the gift of song, whether you're a painter, right? Sometimes you don't have to say a word, and art will communicate very powerfully, and we understand it. We are, I think, without art, you know, it says there's a phrase that says the earth, EARTH, art is right in the middle of EARTH. Without art, the world is just
Oh, so nice. Nicely done.
Art is very powerful. We have to be truthful in how we portray ourselves, and we need to speak to the power that's within, and folks will feel it, and we just have to be honest. So it's going to continue to play a role, and parents have to encourage their children in the house when they see them picking up a paintbrush or some crayons. And you might be saying, no, I need you to go be a business major. Encourage the spirit of that child, right? Because look, artwork, you know, it's not just definitely, you know, it's a starving artist. You're never not going to do anything with artwork. No, that's not necessarily true. Everything we do, the chair that you're sitting in was designed by an artist. The clothes that you're wearing, designed by an artist. The car that you drive, designed by an artist. The house that you live in, designed by an artist. So there are different ways for us to express our skills. And we need to encourage any child that has that gift. It can be utilized in so many ways. You know, all the books that you've written, how poetic the Bible is, that was a gifted writer that we remember those verses. It was written a certain way. You got a song in your head that when it comes on in the car, like, oh, that's my song. Hey.
Absolutely.
Right? So we're impacted by art every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, art is powerful.
And the visual arts, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, visual arts translate a story that needs no translation, right? It always tells a story. Yes. Mm-hmm.
A picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yes, absolutely. So this has been great.
All right.
Thank you so much, Representative Goodwin, for joining us and helping us with our social justice series. We appreciate you so much.
Yes. And my last words are this. We have to be connected to what's going on. The injustice as it relates to police brutality. The injustice as it relates to our ability to vote. Absolutely. There are signs we can make. There are stories to be told. We have to be engaged and we can't go backwards. We got to keep pressing forward.
Amen. We have to tell our own story, right?
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. We appreciate you and we hope you enjoy the rest of this day.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Hello, I'm Dr. Dewayne Dickens from Tulsa Community College. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and I'm also representing with the Links organization today. And we are visiting with Alexander Tahman. And he is a local artist, he is a social advocate, and he is a leader in the community. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we want to ask a few questions of you as an expert in the arts. And so when we think about art, how does or how can the arts directly send messages to the community in reference to social justice and action?
Okay. Well, when I think about that, I think specifically about public art, for one, because it is art that needs no permission to access and to engage with. I think about how it is so accessible and also leveraged in so many capacities when we think of, the economy and how we market things, how we place make and what we design for. I think that art is extremely effectively used to really galvanize communities and to curate so many social experiences, to prompt what I believe to be necessary conversations when used, strategically, especially like within the activism space. Art has, the beautiful quality of not necessarily needing text, not necessarily needing explanation. It is meant to be experienced and to be processed. And I think there's just so much that pertains to, our human experience that art is just so beautifully designed to engage with and to stimulate.
So my understanding is that you have a lot of art, public art, in the community. So as a model, can you sort of, how is that art? Can you take us to something that you've already added in the community? And you say it's an experience. Can you help us experience something that you have created?
Absolutely. Let's see. Several pieces kind of come to mind. I think about where we are in the city. Let's see. I have a public piece on the facade of Living Arts. The gallery just, what is that? East of 244, the expressway, as the IDL kind of wraps around. And it says Black Lives Matter. And that is a statement, right? And it's a colorful and engaging piece that whether you are, whether Tulsa is your home, whether you're in and out of the downtown area, or you're simply passing through and utilizing that highway, it catches your eye, and but for a few seconds you engage with it, there is vivid and colorful imagery. There is potentially triggering imagery in that as well, because there is realistic blood. And there were so many different themes. Of course, the overarching is that Black Lives Matter. And that piece was about hope, about solidarity, about resilience, about so many different things. But the thing about it is, like, I'm not there to, actively speak to the piece as people interact with it, as they engage with it. But the beauty is that they do engage with it, and that they do sit with it, even if, again, but for a few seconds. And I choose to believe that that has the capacity to evoke those necessary conversations and to make people think or feel something. So much of what I believe we are pursuing in terms of solutions for the social ills and the evils that we're experiencing and navigating, especially with so much racial tension. We have to become more comfortable being uncomfortable, and we have to be able to sit with things that aren't necessarily easy to unpack, to dialogue about, and certainly cannot just be succinctly engaged with, and we're done in a matter of moments. It takes time, and that piece has been there for about 4 or 5 years maybe. So
okay,
yeah.
So when you think about that particular piece, since that's the one that you gave us,
Okay.
What is your hope for someone who's not Black, where you're saying Black Lives Matter? What is your hope that they will experience when they see that?
Okay, great question. Well, my hope is that in sitting with that, they begin to engage with it, I think, on more than just like a superficial level, and that they then kind of take whatever feelings that they have about it, whatever thoughts, to members of their community, members within the spheres of their influence, to again just have like a necessary dialogue. We need to have discourse. We need to be able to talk about things, and even if we never see eye to eye on things, the importance is that a seed is deposited, and that conversations are happening, and hopefully those are becoming more increasingly progressive. People are becoming more increasingly self-aware, and with everything that's happening, as we're just kind of, there's just this barrage of so many different things, especially in that space of Black Lives Matter, of social and unrest. There's a lot of necessary change that needs to happen, and I think that necessary change happens in our living rooms. It happens in our shared spaces. It happens in our homes, in our families, and within our communities. And so I'm just wanting to galvanize those communities and charge them up.
Okay. So this community charge up, of course, this year we are in the centennial commemoration year.
Yes, we are.
For the 1921 race massacre. So in thinking about that, as we're moving into that, as we're in this year,
Yes.
it appears that the city government and local officials are pumping. So this is just a question. The history for regentrification purposes, and that's what some people would say. And that this will benefit yet again the white community. So when we think about that, or when you consider that, especially in your artwork, how can art send messages from Black voices to ensure that the legacy of Greenwood and Black Wall Street still belongs to or within the Black community?
Well, okay, so I would say the art first and foremost has to come from, an authentic place, right? From a place of storytelling, a place of reverence and honesty about the past, what has happened. I mean, we're still even, less than a month, now about 2 months away. We're still debating in certain circles as to whether or not it should be called a massacre or a riot, right? And so we have to get honest about, what has transpired, for one. And I think art is a way to, just very viscerally put it out there and say it. And I think it's important, particularly that Black artists, that Indigenous artists, that identity artists are involved in that conversation and are engaged in a way equitably as well to tell that story. As a member of a contemporary collective of Black artists in Black Moon, we've been approached way more times than I can count just within the last month and a half maybe, in terms of like being engaged in having our art in places and having exhibitions and work that reflects the upcoming centennial, and so many thoughts.
Can you tell us Black Moon? Can you tell us what that is?
Yes. Moon. Okay. So yes. Black Moon is a collective of currently 9 contemporary artists living and working here in Tulsa.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how would we get in touch? How would we find them?
You can find us at www.blackmooncollective.com or blackmoontulsa.com. We're on all social media handles as Black Moon. Yeah, we're pretty accessible, and we're pretty out there too. So you definitely can find us.
Okay, I do want to, with this question, there is this statement about Black Wall Street belonging to the Black community. As an artist, can you talk to this sense of belonging to any community? What's your thinking on it belonging to a community?
Well, I mean, I understand the heart behind it in part. I also, have an intersectional identity and experience. And so there are several communities, but there is something, I think, unique in that while we are not a monolith, there are things endemic to our culture, like as Black people and specific to our experience, that we do take ownership, and rightfully so, because we see how it is appropriated, commodified, leveraged against us, marketed and rebranded, for us. And in processing all of that, it is important to recognize that there is something specific to our contribution to the canon and to history in all of this. And so I think it's important that we speak truthfully, and that especially in the art space, that we're there as beacons of light, of hope, and that we are contributing to a conversation that has already kind of been appropriated in so many respects, as everyone is kind of pandering to be a part of centennial celebration and all of the pomp and circumstance like they're in. Like, this isn't just an opportunity to capitalize on the influx of people that will be flooding Tulsa. This is an opportunity to engage with the past in a way that has not happened yet, in terms of honestly sitting with the evils that have occurred and addressing them.
So just sort of digging deeper into, John Hope Franklin mentions this idea of history and shared history, and even if it's sort of fitting in, I'm thinking maybe with this Black Wall Street ownership for a community, where he says, you can't know your history. And he elevates our understanding of any history by saying there is not a Black history and an Asian history and an Indigenous Native American history. There's American history. And if you don't know other people's history, you don't know your history. Right. Because that intertwining aspect of it. So I'm wondering, looking at this sense of ownership through that lens, what from an artist perspective, if you were trying to depict that as an experience, what might be some aims there to try to help people see a history that has been experienced mostly by one group or primarily by that group, but it's important for other groups to get to know it to experience it themselves in order for them to know themselves as well. So could you sort of add to that or speak to it?
Absolutely. Okay, so right now, what immediately comes to mind is I'm currently in a show at the Philbrook. It is called From the Limitations of Now, based on the Ralph Ellison speech. And there's a particular exhibit that still resonates with me as I've been able to, check out the space and all of that. And it will be changing like over the duration of the show, which runs for approximately, I believe, 6 months, where they show news, like headlines and pages from, newspapers from the era, from, Black publications and white publications as well. And just seeing like how even with the same dates and in existing, technically within the same community, there's so much difference and so much spin, on what is worth, being in the papers. But it's important, and it really resonated with me to see that difference, because there are very different perspectives of, what is transpiring and what has happened. And I think in terms of what themes or motifs I would include in art, it would be very similar to that in of course, doing the research to make sure that, there are honest accounts and portrayals of so many different angles of, a time and of a specific event.
Well, great. I think you're sort of speaking to the need for counter narratives to any narrative, or as a famous clip out there through TED Talks of the danger of a single narrative.
Oh, yeah.
And so that those multiple narratives help us see a rounder,
absolutely,
more complex reality.
Absolutely.
So another question for you.
Okay.
Dealing with Black Wall Street. So why was, from your vantage point, why was the Black Wall Street mural painted, the street sign, not considered a mural and a form of street art, such as the same mural that is in Washington, D.C.?
I think that is just a matter of semantics. I believe it is considered, I personally believe it's considered a mural. There are Black Lives Matter murals on streets all across the nation. They are in driveways, they are on public buildings, they're in private spaces. I wholeheartedly believe that constitutes a mural. That constitutes a large scale, artistic work on a public, surface. Happened to be, the street. And I think there were definitely semantics involved and, to justify, removing it.
Okay. The semantics, could you sort of say more on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think speaking to your point of like the counter narrative, the powers that be, say that this is not a mural, that this is not, what they assume is street art, or I'm sorry, not street art, but public art. And we saw what happened to it. It wasn't protected. It wasn't deemed, worthy of being preserved, or, some even would call it vandalism. And that's been like an ongoing conversation in terms of, well, what is street art, in terms of like graffiti or mural work that, is resemblant of more contemporary aesthetic. It's all art to me.
Okay. So that's a fair answer. So a lot of it has to deal with the power structure and who determines what is.
Exactly.
And so, our work in curriculum just says really curriculum is about, or looking at it from a foundational perspective, it's about who gets to decide what goes in and what goes out.
Exactly.
And in this case for art, who gets to decide what a mural is and what it isn't is an important factor. And so I hear that in what you're saying and can agree it's the same question of whether I consider something valid in a classroom curriculum for a course.
Yeah.
who gets to make that determination?
Right.
And that's a power structure. That's a systemic kind of an issue. So how can Black voices? So we're here today asking you the question, how can Black voices be taken seriously in public art, street art, murals, and billboards?
How can that's such a loaded question. And I just had this conversation, or a similar conversation yesterday, actually, with a couple different peers, in that as a Black artist, because of the systemic factors in terms of just the history of Black artists in the West, in the Western world, my work still feels as though it has to be qualified in certain respects by the white gaze for a certain sense of credibility among, my own community and amongst my own peers. And that is something, because I think it's a byproduct of a system that we have, been gatekept out of, right? There's these historical institutions, galleries, and museums that for a long time didn't believe that Black people were capable of creating, work worthy of their walls, and systems have been put in place to keep us out of them, right? So fast forward to now, where there is a need, to showcase more work from Black artists, particularly as, the centennial of the race massacre approaches. And everyone seems to be clamoring to include Black exhibitions and to include, thought-provoking work. I don't have an answer in terms of how will that make people believe in the value and in the credibility and of the artists that are creating the work. It's important for us to be in those spaces. It's important because representation matters, but beyond that, it's also important that we are included in an equitable fashion, right? And that systematically we are integrated into every aspect of the institution, not just as exhibitors, because showing does not necessarily mean acquisition. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily ensure that our work is in collections beyond that. You know what I mean? And there's so much further, there's so much more, that has to happen because it's part of an ecosystem in terms of art. And I don't know. I hope that kind of answers.
I love your answer.
Question.
I do. I love your answer. It reminds me a great deal of one of the. I'm going to look at things typically from educator philosophers and that sort. But Henry Giroux makes educator makes great points about it is never an educator's responsibility to make someone learn, but an educator's responsibility is to create the space, to create the event, create the happening that entices someone to learn.
Yeah.
And so when I take that and put that layer over what you've just said, I hear things like, one, we need to have publications that validate the Black artists. So we need to make spaces that this is validation among the Black artists. Then we need to have that be included in other pieces where it's not just Black art, it's art, period,
right.
from several groups.
Yes.
And then we need to just keep talking about it and scaling it up and entice people through the engagement that happens, that everyone will be excited about giving value to this art that happens to have come from a Black artist, but it's art.
Yeah.
And then it will be elevated. So I'm hearing all of that and thinking about it through that Henry Giroux lens and saying, we're just enticing people to see the greatness of this art. And so I hear that, so just thank you for that. That's what I heard. So in what ways? So this is another question. And I know these are questions that are always just sort of pounding the boundaries of what we normally talk about. So I appreciate you for letting us push you to where no one else wants to talk about.
Yeah.
So in what ways can art and the Black community keep the legacy of Black Wall Street alive after the festivities of this centennial year, and so that the city has benefited, even though the city may have benefited from the profits and the celebration? What do you see that should happen now and after so the legacy continues?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, ongoing programming, ongoing exhibition, ongoing work. I think the conversation needs to continue. You know, it reminds me of this past summer, you know what I mean, when there were so many demonstrations and Black Lives Matter and resiliency were buzzwords, right? And then that just kind of tapered off. I remember experiencing that as a Black creative. Everyone was, you know, clamoring to elevate, to amplify a Black creative, a Black, you know, ... You name it, you fill it in. Everybody just kind of wanted to be a part of contributing in some way. And then it, you know, just sort of like tapers off. And so here we are again, as the centennial approaches. I think there need to be, you know, systematic reforms and systematic ways of including us as Black creatives, as Black entrepreneurs in conversations. We need to have equitable seats at tables. We're not necessarily just being like on the menu, you know what I mean, and not even fully being aware of that fact. Really being able to curate ongoing programming, ongoing engagement. Let's see more businesses. You know what I mean? It would be a travesty for, you know, all of this economic stimulation and all of this growth to happen and to only benefit, you know, the people and the groups and the institutions that it historically has always benefited, right? And not create space and create mobility really for small business and for the scaling of dreams. And of what I believe is, you know, the spirit of Black Wall Street. Like the physical boundaries have been rezoned. That land has been doubly, if not triply, appropriated out of the hands from, you know, from whence it came. However, there are dozens of Black businesses throughout Tulsa and the surrounding areas. I would like to see them scale. I would like to see, you know, more patronage. And you know, I don't have all the answers in terms of like how to structurally make that happen, but part of it, I think, definitely includes like amplifying them and making sure that they are present, that they are accessible, that they are mentioned, that they are trafficked, that they're supported in a way that, you know, I know so much of, you know, what is happening, I think, is curated so that people come to downtown and so that they come, you know, in and around, you know, historic Greenwood. But we need more than that.
Okay, so I think you're sort of drawing a map of what creating that equitable space needs to address and a path forward. So we definitely appreciate that. So this is my last question for you.
Okay.
And so it gives you a lot of liberty here. Okay. Is there anything that you thought I was going to ask today that has not been addressed or that you'd like to add to from something that has already been said?
No, I don't, well, I mean, I don't know. I didn't expect you to ask like any questions other than the ones that I was pretty familiar with, and you know, given the nature of the project, so I did expect, you know, what we discussed. I don't know that I have anything to add. Okay.
Well, do you have anything that you'd like to offer to artists in Tulsa who they're not you, but what advice would you give to them to be part of this legacy building?
Oh my gosh. I would say relationship. it's all about relationship. It's all about community. No one gets anywhere by themselves. And so much of the privilege and the blessings that I have experienced have been because of the relationships that I have been fortunate to have and to nurture. I think one thing that is so unique about Tulsa specifically, that I'm always, kind of sharing with people from outside these invisible borders, is that there is such a collaborative spirit. We're a scaling city, and I think that's beautiful, and I think that is hinged on our collective responsibility and our collective growth and scaling. Like, we're all in this together. It kind of blows me away, and is definitely not something that I take for granted, that I am actively doing life with the likes of, Kojo and Onika Asamoah Caesar, Onika, who owns Fulton Street Books and Coffee, and Vanita Cooper of Silhouette, TJ Woodbury of Poppy's Urban Spa. These are, amazing businesses, but these are people, behind these businesses and communities behind them. And it's so beautiful that we, of course, prior to the pandemic, we're regularly seeing each other at brunch and at, community events and family events and things of that nature. It's a privilege to champion those that you choose to do life with. And so I've just, been fortunate to find a way to use my gifts to, to support these women and men and these businesses. And I would say to every artist, to every creative, to everyone really, find a way to support those around you, to amplify and elevate others. And I think that makes all the difference. It's like the adage, people won't always remember what you did for them, but they'll remember how, you made them feel. And it, I believe, is those feelings and those sentiments that that prompt people to speak your name in places that you don't have the privilege or the access, to be in. And that's certainly something that I've been fortunate to experience and benefit from. And I hope that for my peers as well.
Alexander, thank you. Thank you for your creativity. Thank you for your advocacy and your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greetings from the Tulsa, Oklahoma chapter of the Links Incorporated. My name is Robin Jones, and I am the current chapter president. The Links Incorporated is a women's volunteer service organization committed to enriching, sustaining, and ensuring the cultural and economic survival of African Americans and other persons of African American ancestry. It is a premier international service organization with more than 16,000 members in 288 chapters located in 42 states, the District of Columbia, the United Kingdom, and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We are committed to our legacy of friendship and service to our communities through our 5 facets. Our 5 facets are the arts, health and human service, international trends and services, national trends and services, and services to youth. To learn more about our chapter, please visit our website at www.tulsalinksinc.net. Again, that's www.tulsalinksinc.net. And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. We, the Tulsa chapter of the Links Incorporated, would like to thank Ramona Curtis and Dr. Dewayne Dickens with Tulsa Community College for their partnership with the Social Justice Legacy Series. Thank you so much for watching.